Hello and welcome to this episode of How to Be a Great Player. Well, my name is Guy, and in today's episode we're looking at flying. Flying has a lot of connotations to it, and in the particular game system that you're playing in, maybe you can't actually fly. But a lot of systems do allow for it, and how they express it is often very tricky. So the very first rule that I have as a player when flying is whatever the GM says goes. Now, this is particularly important when we're talking about measuring distance relative to each other. My target is 10 foot below me and 20 foot away from me, horizontally away from me. How far diagonally are they? There's all sorts of wonderful mathematics that you can use to figure that out, but this isn't a math lesson. This is a lesson in how to deal with flying. So if the GM says to me they're 50 feet away, I go, right, that's the call, 50 foot away. Internally, I'm going, I'm fairly certain it's not 50 feet. If I take the square root of the root number and I plumb it, it's probably more like 12 foot 15. But I'll go with 50 because that's what the GM said, and that moves the combat along. So I avoid thinking too hard about flight distance. If the GM says it's 20 foot, it's 20 foot. If they say it's 30 foot, it's 30 foot. If they say it's 10 meters, it's 10 meters. I didn't know we were using metric all of a sudden. What happened? That's great. I let the GM make the call, and I don't fight about it. Generally, I don't fight about many GM calls, as a matter of fact. I smile inwardly and sometimes outwardly. I can't help myself. And then I just move along with it. The GM should be consistent in their application of the call that they made, of course. That would be nice, but it's their call ultimately. Flying is a very difficult space. It's three-dimensional. It's all over the place. So for them to try and keep track of it in a mathematical way, as well as run an engaging combat, it's not worth fighting over. Move on and let the story continue. So now that the maths is out of the way, now we can actually have fun whilst flying. When we, our characters, are flying, as players, our duty is to change how we describe things. We need to describe the feeling of the wind moving through our hair, of looking down on top of things. What does the forest look like from above? What does the spaceport look like when we're flying over it? How do we describe those things? How do we describe the movements of creatures below us? So our descriptions need to change. We can talk about our feelings. What does it feel like to fly? Mankind has had a dream to fly for a very, very long time. We've only recently achieved it, and it's still not 100% guaranteed. We can still fall out of the sky. So when there's flying, when there's turbulence particularly, fear suddenly wells up. We're out of control. So there's that nervousness, that gut-wrenching, stomach-twisting, oh, I've just given myself goosebumps thinking about it. There's that nervousness that we can't just put our feet down and stop. That familiarity of land is no longer there. So the fears are there, the feelings are there. These are things that we can describe to our fellow players to give a sense that our character is flying. Positioning is also important. We can move up and we can move down, as well as left and right and backwards and forwards and diagonally too. So we need to free our mind of just this idea of I move closer or I move further away. I move above. I move below. Those are very, very important descriptors, and they should give you advantage or disadvantage depending on the situation as to where you might be. Again, if the GM puts you on a block grid or a hexagonal grid and they sort of fudge it, go with it. Don't fight it. It's not about the position. It's more about the story anyway, at least on this channel. So the idea is that you should be describing the way that you move very differently to how you would normally describe combat. Generally, we don't even describe how we move when we're talking about terrestrial-based combat because everyone's done it. We've all experienced it in one shape, form, or another, and so it's easy for us to ignore those pieces of information. I step forward, I lunge forward, I stamp the ground with my feet. Those sort of things we don't necessarily include, but with flying we can because it's such a weird, strange, wonderful place. Now, not every maneuver needs to be described, of course. You can be selective in the way that you do it, and, well, once you've been doing it for a long time, or if everybody's flying, then it's a different experience. But It is something to bear in mind. Now, if your enemies are flying and you are not, this is a problem. You can't reach them. It's frustrating, isn't it? The GM puts a flying creature with a bow and you have nothing. You have a sword. Just shoot me until I'm dead because I can't do anything else. That's not entirely true. If you have rope, you can create a lasso, which you can try and hook onto the creature's feet if it's within range. You can look at the geography that's around you. Is there an overhang? Is there a tree? Is there a cave? Can I hide underneath it? Do I have a large shield that I can hide behind from these incoming arrows? Maybe your system that you're playing in doesn't necessarily take into account a shield as much protection against an arrow. It's just changed your to hit difficulty. But if you are literally hiding behind a shield, cowering behind that shield as a separate structure, that should give you some kind of mechanical advantage in one shape, form or another. It's not something to fight with the GM over, of course, it's something to suggest. But the idea is that you want to get that flying creature to your space. So if you don't have ranged attack, if you don't have some means of attacking something that's flying above you, flying far away from you, you need to really engage with your geography. Look at what's around you and make and take advantage of it. That's something that's very, very important. So don't get frustrated if you don't have range. Think smarter than your enemy. Move to a place where your enemy has to come down to you. That's a critical thing. So flying, of course, then causes problems with your companions. If you can fly but nobody else can, you can cover a lot more distance than they can. The term "as the crow flies" refers to distance. Oh, it's about a mile as the crow flies. As the human plods, it's 10 because you have to go around that giant pit of doom in the middle, which you could just fly over. So if you have the capacity to fly and your companions do not, think about what they are feeling as players. Oh, look, there goes Susan. Off she goes. Yep, flying all the way to the side. She gets the treasure. We are left on the side with nothing. Yes, it may have been because of smart role-playing that you have the capacity to fly and your companions do not. Don't be a dick about it. Don't use it to gain advantage all the time. Spread the love. Become the flying creature that they go to for help rather than look at with jealousy or with scorn or with contempt. So make sure that if you can fly, you have the best interests of your party at heart and you use it as often as you can, but don't force the GM to have to include aerial creatures by completely taking advantage of every combat by just flying up into the air. Sure, the GM will include archers and magic users and things that can actually reach you. That's absolutely fine. But if you constantly are lifting your companions out of the way of danger, making them all fly somehow, the GM is going to have to shift the campaign to being more aerial based, which is not a problem necessarily. But if you're the only one who can fly, it becomes a problem. So balance out your flying with your terrestrial-based combat. Make sure that it isn't the sole focus of your character, because otherwise that can become very boring. It can become very, very dull very quickly. And a good place to look at examples of that is if you look at superheroes. A lot of superheroes have the ability to fly, because that's super. We as humans can't do it without giant machines around us. So as a mutant, to be able to fly is fantastic. A lot of them can fly. The ones that can't have to take jets and all sorts of weird and wonderful craft. The ones that fly, though, there's very little aerial combat that happens. They often fly to places and then engage in combat. They fly a companion somewhere and then there's combat on the ground. So that is something to bear in mind, is that we temper the ability with the narrative story that we are avoiding by not engaging on ground-based movement frequently. It is something to bear in mind. It's a bit of a call, yes. If you can fly, take advantage of it, of course, but temper it just a little bit. Anyway, this video, I hope, inspired you to look at flying in a slightly different way, to contemplate how to fly in different ways, and to think about what's more important to you, flying or telling a good story, or finding a happy balance. That always is the goal. It's a happy balance in terms of what should we do. This video was requested by Michael from askapathfinder.com, which, sorry, not .com, Ask a Pathfinder. He's on Facebook. You can go and find him there. He gives out advice on how to run and play within Pathfinder games, Pathfinder the system specifically. And he was chatting to me and said, flying is a very difficult subject because it raises all of these kind of issues. And there aren't really hard and fast rules in most rule systems that cover it. So it's about you balancing the whole system and working with your GM. Always let the GM decide, but working with that GM, giving them suggestions, advice, supporting them as best you can as to how to make the most out of it so that it doesn't get completely ignored, but it does get added to add flavor to your character. If you like the video, hit the like button. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button, of course, and head on over to www.rpgtablefinder.com if you're looking to join a role-playing group, whether online or in your local area. This is a website, app, phone app, it works everywhere, that the Web Goblin developed specifically for you guys, for all of our wonderful viewers, to connect with one another and to socialize and to find other like-minded individuals to role-play with. Anyway, until next time, I wish you and yours the happiest of playing.